This is Nick Ricada, and you're listening to a Sunset Sea production. It's better than whiskey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 25 of the Imperial Tides podcast. Today, we're coming to you with the second part of 14, second episode of Berlin Alexanderplatz. And, last episode was like an hour and a half because that was the introduction to the whole film. This one was only about like 50 minutes or so. It wasn't as long and not as much happened. And so, like I said in the last episode, the run times for these might be different. The conversations might be different, just depending on what part we're on. So it's not always going to be a super lengthy, involved conversation. I feel like, I'll just say this now. I don't want to like taint the mood of the conversation right away. But I will say that I don't know if there's going to be as much to get into this time because not as much happened. So and this was a bit of an interesting episode, but before we get into it, I guess I'll provide you guys with a quick summary. So last time we were introduced to the character of Franz Bieberkopf, who is a German man who's just been released from, living in Germany in the 1920s, Berlin, the capital. He was just released from prison after killing his wife because she was having an affair. He served 4 years for that, but was let out immediately after. And has now kind of gotten himself back up on his feet, and he's dating a Polish girl named Lena. He's got so he's trying to start over. He's trying to make up for his past sins or whatever, and just get on with his life. And so this second episode, so the first episode was just sort of an introduction to everything. This next one kind of just follows up on that and seems to have the theme of the economy almost. This episode's about Franz's money problems, I guess, money troubles. And the title of the episode is, so the title of the previous one was The Punishment Begins. This is part 2, episode 2, and it's called How is One to Live If One Doesn't Want to Die? And it's all about Franz trying to find some stable, effective work that will keep him on his feet, he and Lena, going. And so I guess just to provide a quick summary of what happens, Franz, in this episode, he's struggling to make ends meet. The German economy is in a downturn, so jobs are few and far between. He tries working at first as a tie holder salesman, but fails, kind of fails at it, doesn't make any sales. So then after that, he tries to then sell controversial magazines about all sorts of taboos of the time, right? So there's like a magazine about feminism. There's a magazine about homosexuality. There's a magazine about sexual liberation. All sorts of kind of fringe topics. There's magazines for, and he's basically got to peddle this like cheap, lowbrow stuff to the public of the time. And yeah, so then after that doesn't go too well because by selling those magazines, it actually ends up threatening the relationship that he has with his Polish girlfriend, Lena. She's mad about it, and so he's forced to give that up as well. And so in the end, he decides to become a political newspaper salesman for a guy that he basically just met at a bar one night, and ends up from there essentially just turning into a literal Nazi for quick cash, which puts him at odds with some of his old friends in the neighborhood, and they almost get into a fight in the bar. And that's pretty much all that happens. I don't know, is there anything you'd like to add to that, Simone? Did I miss anything? Is there anything you want to comment on?
Uh, that's all that's happened. But I know we can get into this in the conversation, but what's interesting in this are some of the lines that are included or some literary pieces that they are mentioned.
Right, yeah, like in the bar, they're reading, they're reciting poetry, they're singing kind of traditional German songs, and there's a lot of socio-political tension going on. And yeah, we can get into all that in a bit, but yeah, I understand. I know what you mean. But okay, so as usual, standard question for every discussion. Simone, what would you rate this part out of 10 and why?
Yeah, maybe it's a bit surprising, but I'll give it again a 9 or 9.5.
Really?
maybe I will change my initial impression, or the previous episode. I'll give it a perfect 10, and this one would be a 9.
Sure.
I gave it its rating because um I'm interested. It get me into the story about in the previous episode. There are also some literary works that are mentioned, some stories that the other character told, and some poems and songs that are included. But in this one, I'm able to get into those, to mean something out of those, or to it's made me question a lot of things, or get into a bit of own conclusions or conversation with myself with those literary works, and I'm still trying to process those things.
Huh. Yeah, that's funny because to be honest, I'd have to give this episode a 6 out of 10. I thought the writing was a bit bad, to be honest. Like, it was pretty awful compared to how it was in the first one. And I think a lot of it has to do with pacing, because to me, I understand that they set up the fact that the economy's bad and that he's running out of jobs and whatnot. But the way that it's executed in the show, it's a little stupid to me. I don't know. I don't like that. It's like it's all a little too convenient. It's like he has the first job as a tie holder salesman or whatever, and like, yeah, that goes badly because nobody wants to buy tie holders. No one gives a fuck about them. The item he's trying to sell is not good, so it's not going to be a viable position for him to take. I can understand that one, but then it's that scene where he's like he's reading the story, or he's telling Lena the story that he read in the gay magazine or whatever about the guy who's like convicted for paying another man for sex or whatever. It's like, and then it's like Lena just gets mad for whatever reason, and then like of course it was very convenient, wasn't it? It was very convenient that like that wouldn't work out for whatever reason. It's like, so she gets so mad about it that she ruins the chance that that Franz had with the vendor to continue working for him. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, if she doesn't want him to sell these weird controversial magazines, then why doesn't he just ask for a different job from the guy? Because it seemed like the vendor had more things to sell than just those weird fringe publications or whatever. It's like he was the guy that kind of like it was too much to risk to just like set that whole opportunity on fire or whatever. It's like if she hadn't like freaked out like an insane person or whatever, like a fucking psychopath, none of this would have happened in the first place. And so just the writing is a little too easy. It's like the person who put either this part of the book together, or this episode, whoever wrote the script, it's obvious that they're just trying to move from point A to point B to point C, and they're not making it convincing enough for me. It's not realistic enough. It's like, why, like, Lena knows that the economy's in a shithole right now because of the Treaty of Versailles, because of the end of World War I. The Allies made Germany pay all these reparations, and it's like $430 billion in U.S. money today. It's a lot of, so they're in like a huge national debt right now. Like, I feel like she should, and I mean, like they established at the very beginning in the opening scene that like Franz is kind of strapped for cash. So I don't really understand why she would like piss away the one source that they had to make money just because she doesn't like gay people or whatever. Like, I don't know. It just seems like really shitty writing to me. Yeah, weird episode. And because it's like what, I don't understand why he only has the options between, why can he only, that just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, why can he only either be a Nazi or a fucking, like a homeless person? I don't know. Why are those the two choices that he has? It just doesn't, I didn't like the way that they set it all up. But maybe it's just my opinion, but I don't know. What do you think, Simone? What would you like to add to that?
Maybe my attention is focused on what it's not on what happened in this episode, but maybe on the different perspective. Just like I mentioned, I like the literary works that is included. For example, the engagement during the when he made his acquaintance on the train stations, and get into the conversation regarding his perspective, or his positions in the social, becoming a Nazi and whatnot. I like the story, and maybe my attention is really focused on that scenes because until now, it's that's all I can think of with this episode.
Okay. Sure, yeah. Um, yeah, that is a good scene. But I guess to go into to carry the conversation in a chronological way. I mean, I guess the first real significant thing that happens is with Eva. So what I want to ask you is, well, Simone, what do you think of the character of Eva so far? You know, she's the girl Franz once knew who continues to pursue him, even though he's trying to start his life over. Yeah, like I don't know, who is she? Like, where does she come from? What does she want from him? And how can she like him knowing what he did? You know, knowing that he murdered his wife. And plus, I mean, it seems like she's with another man already anyway. So, why does she continue to follow Franz around? I don't know. What are your thoughts regarding all of that?
Uh, Maybe some simple. I don't know if it might be viable or meaningful to that conclusion. Maybe there's a different story that we haven't seen yet. For example, how how things turns out or how they reveal in the first episode what happened before Franz get into the prison or what's the reason for him to be in jail. Uh, so that's why how I see it. Or there might be some other stories that take place before that uh, scenario.
Do you have any predictions as to what's going to happen between the two of them?
Yeah. Um, with Lina's character, she's really easy to play with, or uh, even though Lina is easy to get mad, or her impulses is really weird, or it it takes over the situation. She changes the atmosphere really easily, or whatever, and then Franz is able to play around with her to change her mind also easily. With how each approach changes, it really goes really smoothly. And even though this kind of relationship is closed easily, there might be some possible plot twists that might take place. For example, they might be separated or the relationship will no longer work. And with this woman, uh she might appear in those particular scenes.
Right. Yeah. Um. Yeah, I don't have anything to say about that question. To be honest, I don't have an answer. We'll see what happens. We'll see how things develop. But okay. So then after that, of course, you've got the big scene where and this is sort of like a highlight reel. I mean, not much happened. There's a lot of dead space between moments, I guess, in this episode. But Simone, what did you think of the story from the gay magazine about the bald man who propositions the younger man for sex and then ends up getting arrested for it or whatever? What did you think of that whole thing? And like, why was it in the episode? What significance did it bring?
uh, I will connect it with the culture of the German people during the time. For example, it takes place in the 1920s, and still these kinds of issues is not really brought up. It's not normal, so people might find it strange, and maybe people try to avoid these kinds of scenarios. It's not only on the social issue, but also in some kinds of culture. It's based on whatever their culture is. It's not they're really open with this, especially on how things turns out or how the people discover this kind of affair. They saw this man and the boy enter the hotel, and then they've been curious and and look at the peak hole, and that's happened.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the way I see the story being featured in the episode itself, it kind of it sort of it's there as an indication, an indicator that times are, I guess, changing a little bit. You know, that the 1920s in Germany, it's a very pivotal time. You know, because I feel like that's going to be a big theme in this show overall. You know, is just how you went from the Germany that existed during the First World War and before that, and the Germany that will exist uh, with World War II and everything that comes after, I guess. You know, it's the interwar period. I mean, it's a period of literal transition, you know, going from one major world event to the other, between two world wars too, the biggest conflicts ever, um, and so I think this is just another one of those things. It's like it's just showing that the world is moving. It's moving forward. It's got this pace of just constant forward momentum, and attitudes towards certain taboo topics or whatever are changing more and more every day. I mean, the old man, the vendor sending who sells the newspaper, sells these controversial magazines or whatever, even says, it's like a lot of people buy these. Like there's a market for it. We wouldn't sell them if people didn't read them or whatever, right? And so, but then it also, I mean, it clearly the reaction Lena has to it is interesting as well. So that's what I want to ask you about next. What did you think of Lena's reaction to the story when Franz tells it? She runs out on him and is about to leave him because he tells it to her. So I don't know. What do you think of that whole dynamic?
Maybe this scene is what you mentioned earlier, that you find a little plot holes, or not exactly plot holes. The pacing is kind of off. I don't think I get it now. Is it really takes place the scenario, or how things progress into this kind of woke up scene, and Lena is in get mad and threatening him to leave. It's just there's some hole, I think, with how he reacted. There might be much more. I'm thinking of a conversation that might be the reason for her to act like the way that she does. But with just the full listening to the story, there might not be the reaction might not be that harsh, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I felt like there was a disparity between the way that and I don't even think it's not even necessarily her reaction that's the problem. It's just the steps that took her to that point. Because before that she's they show her like she's just listening to the story. She's pretty neutral about it. She has really no opinion or reaction to it while he's reading it. But then the second he's done reading it, like she goes from 0 to 100, freaks out, becomes like a completely different person, and then just this whole exchange ensues where she's like, oh, I'm going to leave you now. It's like, well, where did that come from? That came out of absolutely nowhere, and it wasn't a realistic sort of visceral reaction, because people can have visceral reactions to things. They can be caught off guard. They can be highly emotional depending on the circumstances. But I didn't feel as though this particular instance or scenario or whatever was warranted, because everything up until that point was fine. It was like a flat line and then just a huge spike, and then that's it. It's like, what? It just doesn't make any logical sense in terms of the script writing itself. So I thought it was I thought it was jarring. I thought it was a little too jilted. It came out of absolutely nowhere and completely changed the atmosphere in a way that wasn't natural or organic or as smoothly flowing as it could have been. I think. But yeah, so then, and I guess, I mean, obviously the reaction is supposed to be there to show that, things are changing, but not right away. There's still this disgust that the general population has towards, same-sex relationships and all that. It's still very much a taboo, even if it's getting a bit of, even if it's getting some legs in the underworld or the underground. I guess it's not mainstream yet, and it's far from being mainstream. So obviously the juxtaposition of the story being read, very controversial, very sort of, I guess, what's the provocative kind of story? It's not really that provocative. I mean, obviously by today's standards, it's nothing at all. And I think that's also another point as well, is that it's such a mundane, tame story. I mean, there's nothing really overly explicit about it. It's just a play-by-play of a pretty ordinary exchange by today's standards. But obviously that also sort of highlights how different things are then in 1920s Germany. Yeah, I mean, the juxtaposition between that very tame story and Lena's kind of excessive reaction to it, or I guess I should say overreaction. I get that it's supposed to make the point that, yes, the world is changing, but at a very slow pace. But I just didn't like the way it was executed. It came off as very flat, and it kind of killed itself in the middle of delivering the message, I guess. I don't know. I mean, do you have anything you'd like to add to that before we move on to the next question, Simone?
I remember that this was shown in 1980s. the way that we see it today might be not maybe the recognition way back in 1980 might be also the same in the 1920, but I think it's not that harsh as how it was portrayed in the situation or scene.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. The '80s weren't that long ago. And I mean, in the '80s, you had people like Prince and you know, is David Bowie gay? I don't even know. Iggy Pop. You had a bunch of in music especially. You had a bunch of like effeminate whatever. Like whatever ultra traditional models of masculinity that used to be the norm weren't really as much of a norm back in the '80s. I don't think. Uh, I don't know. You could be. I think. The connection's a little too vague. I don't think I don't think either of us could really speak too meaningfully on it. I don't think I just don't think it's there. But yeah. So then after that, so immediately after that, Franz does the thing again. The thing that he's got this habit of like biting women or whatever on the neck. And so what I want to know, Simone, is what did you think of when he bit Lena on the neck and she just submitted to it? Is that the sign of a healthy relationship in your personal judgment? Or is there something sinister underlying the dynamic between the two of them?
Maybe something sinister because it's not the norm. Well, people how we normally respond to things that is not a norm is uh, we didn't actually accept it right away, or we just act awkwardly or differently as a response to this because it's not normal and it's related to some um, weird behavior that might be connected in some mental problems or not exactly mental problems but to a different scene knowing that Beavercop is an ex-convict. So I don't know what's wrong with Lena with everything that she is. It's just when he when she met him, uh, she been submissive all the time. And even though there's a particular in the previous scene that she didn't like what Beavercop told her, she's still submissive in there. It's always this scenario. So I thought that there would be much more in her character in this particular episode, as I mentioned in the last episode, that I'm expecting to see more of Lena, more of an in-depth view, or maybe some clues of who she really is. But I think that she might probably be the way she is, but we'll see.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um. You know, you got a lot of relationships like this one though. Where it's like the guy has mommy issues and the girl has daddy issues, and they both come together. It's the stereotype. It's like, well, why is this person I'm dating so bad at relationships or whatever? Oh, it's probably because they've got mommy or daddy issues or whatever. That's the cliche, right? Is that they had a weird childhood and there's some weird psychological issue came out of that. I feel like that's what's happening here. It's just a textbook example of two people kind of looking for something in the other that they can't really get, because it doesn't really exist or whatever. It's like maybe he's looking for motherly approval in Lena, Franz is, and maybe Lena's looking for a fatherly protection from Franz, and so that's why she stays with him even though he bites her neck and is like rough and kind of unpredictable at times. Although I will say, like in this episode, until he became a literal Nazi, he was actually pretty like tame and pretty like laid back and kind of playful almost. He was like cracking jokes. He seemed pretty stable. If he hadn't met that guy in the bar, I kind of feel like he would have been all right. Maybe that's kind of what they're leading up to, is that he's fucked now. But I feel like it's kind of dumb still. I don't know. It's like, what's the point? They didn't set it up well enough. I don't know. It comes out of nowhere. Very jarring pacing. Pacing's everything. It's if you fuck it up, you kind of fuck up you derail the whole narrative, I think. That's just my opinion. But yeah. So there's that between them. It's kind of a weird little dynamic, but it seems to be something that he has with all women, like we said last episode. It's like Eva's still attracted to him, even though she knows that he's a killer. Even though she's with another guy, I mean, she's still like expressing interest in him and going out of her way to be nice to him and whatnot. Reach out to him and everything. So there's that weird dynamic, and then with the dead sisters or the dead wife's sister even, there's this weird thing where it's like they all sort of bend towards him and bend towards his will or whatever. And maybe that's a form of like personal fascism or something. Maybe that's what they're trying to establish, is that, this, while there's this Nazism happening in the political background, there's also this kind of personal fascism that's going on in Franz's life with the people around him. He's sort of a dictator in his own right, almost, maybe. Maybe they're trying to establish something like that, which would be interesting to see. But so far, the execution, it's too early on to say anything definitive. So you can only speculate so much. But that's what I kind of feel they might be moving towards. But I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, we haven't seen enough. But so then after that, what did you think of? So when he goes to destroy, so when he and Lena go to kind of basically fire themselves from the job they had with the vendor in the subway station, what did you think of Franz's monologue to himself during that scene where he's watching Lena throw the magazines and the journals at the old man? And it's because this monologue is a bit different from the others. It's distinct. It has a different tone and a voice to it, and it came across as a sort of like a passage from a classic adventure romance novel from the of the time or something. It's like it's very dramatic. It's very highfalutin, kind of like oh, look at this. I am the great Franz. I'm standing in the corner as the great Polish heiress that is my girlfriend Lena. Some overly dramatic, sappy thing like that. What was the point of that? Like, what did that add? What effect does it create in that scene? I don't know. Like, did you get anything out of it?
A more character observation, I guess, how things might progress, or to change the mood. The mood might be more serious or more compressed, and given the previous scenes that prior to this, I think it's what this changes the mood. It makes the pacing, or not exactly the pacing, but the I think there could be another highlight of this episode, in the interesting part of this episode.
Right. Yeah. And it's it's like it's weird because the voice that the narrator has clearly isn't the same voice that it's not Franz talking to himself. It's like some imaginary persona or something. So it's weird, like his monologues and stuff, the voices in his head, because I think he's clearly fucking batshit insane. There's a range of them. There's like a whole cast of characters in there, and none of them have really been properly introduced to us yet. So it's weird to see it sort of materialize itself over the course of the movie so far. It's weird, but hopefully there's more to come on that. Well, so now I guess to shift gears a little bit, I guess I'll establish this with a little bit of background context. So like I said earlier, the backdrop in this episode, the theme is clearly about money. It's about Franz's struggle to make money and to find stable employment, and yeah, I mean, like I said, so Germany at the time, for the historical context or whatever, right? It's like, so the Germany of the time is still sort of freshly reeling from losing World War I. They're in huge national debt because of the Treaty of Versailles, right, which ended World War I, and so of course it would make sense that there would be a lot of unemployed Germans, and why Franz is having such a hard time in this episode to find stable, sufficient work, and it does sort of suggest as well that he may have been better off in prison after all. Maybe his worries at the beginning of the first episode were maybe justified, warranted. And so just to give a little bit of context, the Treaty of Versailles, like I said before, it decreed that Germany pay around like $442 billion in today's money, U.S. The year 2021. It would be $442 billion worth of reparations for damages caused during the war. And it's a popular assumption to make that this was one of the reasons why the Nazi Party became so prominent and why World War II even happened in the first place. But as far as I can tell, and I'm not an expert here, we're laymen, we're casuals when it comes to all this stuff. But as far as I can tell, it's a little more complicated than that. It seems as though the damages affected the way Germany viewed the rest of the world more so than it did the national economy there. But obviously it did affect the economy, just not to the extent that they thought it would, I guess. It didn't completely obliterate it. Times were tough, but they weren't like impossible, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And like it didn't completely break them in half. It was just, it sucked or whatever, but it wasn't to the same extent that a lot of people seem to assume that it was. I think it's one of those popular myths or whatever, But I think the more important thing is that it made Germany very against the rest of the world, I guess, because of it. It sort of established that resentment towards the Allied forces, towards everybody else, I guess, because it was sort of a big, bold move to take, and I think Woodrow Wilson, who was the U.S. president at the time, I think he was against the Treaty of Versailles, or at least that part of it, because he was worried that something like World War II would basically happen if they pissed off the Germans by, giving them such a heavy price to pay or whatever, such an intense punishment or whatever. So it's one of those things that has a lot of angles to a lot of sides. It's very complicated, but yeah. In the show, they establish, though, the figure they come up with is that there are currently around 673,582 Germans unemployed. And I don't know how accurate that is to the reality of Germany's like actual economic state at the time, but it's safe to say that shit's a little messed up, and so that's supposed to provide the justification for why Franz gets involved in the whole Nazi thing. But I still don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't think it's believable enough. But that's what they try to establish anyway. So yeah. And I guess my question relating to all of that, if I can pull it up here, is about just the broader historical context itself, Simone. So what I want to know is, do you think the Treaty of Versailles was a primary cause of World War II? And also, do you think it was fair, the price and all that? What are your thoughts?
I haven't read the whole Treaty of Versailles, but I kind of hear something or remember something from it from school, but not as in depth as it should be. But by the given information, with the information that you gave it sounds like that the Treaty of Versailles is really the reason why the Germans resort to started the World War II, or it might be the main factor why all that happened, or the chaos that the World War II set. Because it's the economy, the German economy is really down. They really get into the slums, or I don't know what's exactly the word to describe it, but it's really in its downside, because $1 billion that you mentioned in today's money that they need to pay. So it might be some political issues to mention the Holocaust, or because they need to pay reparations, so they resort to these kinds of inhuman resources or activity that the world still condemns today.
That's not the way I would put it, but obviously it's a super complicated thing. I feel like we're both out of our depth with this, but I would say it's more so the fact that obviously, like, the Nazis used it as a political move. They used it as an excuse to, piss people off, to get them to support the, killing of like 6 million people or whatever. It was a bad time. That's what I'll say. And this series so far, it's not afraid to be really uncomfortable. It doesn't stray from the controversial. It doesn't really give a shit. It just goes straight into it, kind of balls deep. And yeah, it's kind of a lot to take in. I don't know. Like I'm kind of uncomfortable talking about it right now. I don't want to be like, it's weird. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's yeah. I don't usually feel that way about the shows we watch. Even like Andrei Rublev, which has some pretty, I guess, controversial stuff in it. It's not like this. It's not quite like this. It's weird. It's a weird one. But I guess it's good to feel uncomfortable sometimes. I guess that's the point, right? But so after that, you've got the part where they go into the ballroom, right? He and Lena decide to try to have a little bit of fun to forget about the fact that they're probably fucked financially, right? So then they go to the ballroom, and even the ballroom scene's kind of disturbing. It's like there's no like one purely nice scene in this entire thing so far, because even in the bar, like the people singing, they're singing about really weird things, like men being cuckolded and cheated on by their wives or whatever. And then also like, well, just the fact that nobody has any money. There's like a song about how some kid wants his mom to buy him a Coca-Cola from the Coke man, but she can't because they don't have any money. So it's like they're all acknowledging that things are messed up or whatever. And again, it's another one of those things in the script writing. The script itself is trying to, again, pound on more evidence that things are really hard. They're establishing, yes, the economy is really bad. So, Franz is going to have to become a straight up Nazi in order to, survive or whatever. And I still don't buy it. I still don't buy. There's so much shit being heaped on, but I don't buy any of it for a second. It's just weird. I don't know. Maybe it's the writing, or maybe it's just me. But I don't like the direction this episode took. If you couldn't tell already. But yeah. So then, anyway, he meets this gray-haired guy in the bar, and the guy's like all kind of interrupting him and Lena's time together, and he's just like a typical barfly or whatever. Just some old depressed guy, some old man, just ranting on about whatever. And that's exactly what he does. He just rants about like how Germany should be for the Germans again and all that. And he's this very highly nationalistic person, and so what I want to know is I don't know, Simone, and I want you to, because I wrote this question before I the twist or whatever, but like I guess there's no point, but because the question I had was I was going to ask you if his nationalism was a good thing or a bad thing, and if he was some sort of proto-Nazi, or if he actually had like a valid point to make. But the thing about it is that, I mean, like 2 seconds after that scene, it's revealed that he actually is like a straight up Nazi, and that the Nazi Party was established in 1920, right? So a lot earlier than I think a lot of people tend to think or whatever. But I guess that question kind of doesn't matter anymore. But so what I'll ask you instead is just, I don't know, what do you think of the concept of nationalism in general? Putting your country before everybody else's, or whatever. I don't know, however you would define nationalism. I'll look up the definition for nationalism as you give me some basic ideas, thoughts right now. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I don't know. Filipinos are not really so. They're always talking about nationalism at school. For example, it's one of our core values. I'll mention it. Makalikasan, makabansa, at makajos. It means care to nature, nationalism, and God fearing. It's one of the main, and those are the three core values at school that we learn, or every institution have. But it's not really established that much, because for example, it's quite ironic that even though at school these are the core values that are mentioned, or that are really put into the law or whatever by the government, but it's weird that what are the things that we learn at school is not really directed into this. It's not really it's started from all of this. I think that we're kind of getting far from the conversation itself, but it's not really something. It's really ironic at school how we learn these things. I think that nationalism is only you can achieve it here by doing it on your own, doing the work on your own, getting into the history, and knowing your roots or whatnot.
Right. Yeah. And so let's read the two Google definitions that they have for nationalism. So the first one, the main one, is nationalism is identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. And so the example, right, that's said here is their nationalism is tempered by a desire to join the European Union, right? So that's the first one. The second definition is nationalism is advocacy of or support for the political independence of a particular nation or people. And so the example that they have for that one is Scottish nationalism. So for me, I feel like the first definition is a little biased almost. I don't like that it says like I don't like that they had to add, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. It makes it so that it seems like, definitions need to be objective, right? They need to not be political or whatever. I feel like that one's a little political, and I feel like the times we're living in, I'm just going to fucking say it. I don't know. It might be a little controversial with the current climate that we're living under or whatever, but it's like, every political movement, every social and political movement has problems. They have bad eggs. They have members who want power. They want to use whatever cause they're supposedly fighting for as an excuse to do bad or whatever. Not everything is done in good faith. And I think we've got a world today where it's like a lot of people are just really naive about that sort of thing. I think the reality of the situation is that life is really, what it comes down to is work, work and paying bills and shit. Like most people don't have time for this. Like, they don't have the luxury. They can't afford the luxury of pretending to give a shit about some political or social cause or whatever, And I'm just, to be completely honest, I'm a completely apolitical person. I don't give a fuck about politics, Even though the past few years have been very politically charged or whatever, especially in the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is a fucking shithole when it comes to politics lately, But it's all just entities, using the internet and using social media, and that's literally all it comes down to. It's just people sort of getting roped in by just dumb shit, And there are a lot of dumb fucking people just doing dumb fucking stuff on both sides of all sides of the spectrum or whatever, Whether you're a lefty or a righty or a conservative or a liberal, it's like they're all fucking wrong. I don't know. It's best to be an independent, And not a nationalistic independent, but a political independent. You vote for the person you think is best for the job. You vote for whoever you think is going to handle whatever issue the best, or whoever's the most qualified candidate. That's who you vote for. Don't bind yourself to one party or the other. That's just fucking retarded. That's my opinion on it anyway. I'm not necessarily, and I don't give myself a name to what I am. I wouldn't say I'm a libertarian or whatever, but I would say I'm probably closest to being a libertarian. But I don't like labels because they're binding. You get trapped in them, and I think any movement is fucked. But I feel like people like to, they give nationalism so much shit because it has an obvious example of when it goes wrong or whatever with Hitler and stuff. People are really hung up on that, and it's a very politicized thing. It's a very cherry-picked thing. Obviously, everyone can agree that Hitler's version of nationalism, whatever, is fucking terrible, right? It's shit. It's beyond shit. It's a fucking horror show, I don't think any sane, fucking rational, decent person would disagree with that. That's an objective truth across the board, across the political spectrum, whatever. But see, the same people who write this definition on Google ignore all the problems with, let's say, like a system like communism or Marxism or whatever. These are the same people who praise like that dickwad Che Guevara or whatever. That revolutionary who killed a fuck ton of people, but they worship him like a hero because it's cool to. And that's the fucking stupid world we're living in. It's like we've gotten to a point where we're so well off, that we're so privileged, we're so free that we can literally afford to glorify like mass murderers and stuff for the sake of being ironic or different. Like, look how unique I am. I think Stalin's pretty cool. I think Karl Marx had some great ideas. It's like, okay, I don't know. It's just dumb. It's just dumb as fuck. This is the guy, by the way. This cocksucker. Yeah, just shitty person, but it's like, no, everything's always Hitler, and it's like, again, obviously Hitler's a piece of dog shit, but so is Che, so is Pol Pot, so is the Vietnamese guy from World War II, or the Vietnam War, whoever was in charge there, yeah, it's just a fuck fest. I don't know. I don't want to get much more into it, but do you have anything you want to add? Can you talk about Duterte or whatever? Like, I know that guy's like Rodrigo Duterte. I know he's a controversial guy or whatever.
I don't know. I haven't met any politicians. There are only one or two politicians that I know that arguably and everyone is so fucked up, or they don't really know what they're doing here in our country. So that's why the politics is just a joke for me or for everyone. That's why it's everything that you heard is on Facebook or any social medias regarding the politics is all just memes and jokes about it. It's really ironic that it's never been professional at all.
Right. Yeah, and what I'll say, just to cap that off, is just in general, I don't know why I have to say this, but like I don't like Trump or Joe Biden. I think they're both fucking assholes. I think every politician is a piece of garbage. That's just what it comes down to. And it's so stupid to me that like people are still shocked by the fact that politicians don't really have our best interests in mind. You mean politics isn't a humanitarian game? It's just all about power and control. Like, really? It's like, yeah, no fucking shit. It's like, I mean, look at all the fucking things they do. Look at all the decisions they make. It's all for themselves. Like, that's what it comes to. It's like, what's so hard to understand about that? It's human nature. We're fucking terrible. We should probably, like, none of us, we should probably give the world back to the dogs and the cats and shit at this point, honestly. The world would be better off without the human race, I think, just in general. We are a terrible species. To be exaggerated about it, obviously. But, yeah, man, I don't know. Wait, what was I even trying to go for? Oh, yeah. What I wanted to know is there, so I'm not even going to get into the American side of it, but for the Filipino side, I'm curious, has there ever been like a Filipino equivalent of like the Nazi party or Nazism or whatever? Like, is there anything like that over there? I'm just curious. I just asked this one out of my own personal interest, but just wondering, what do you think?
Uh, Similar politicians like that or a movement. I haven't heard, but that extreme or maybe that everyone will agree on that particular team the same with the Nazis, but mostly people who do those kinds of things are terrorists. That's what I only know. Well, with into connection with it,
Oh,
with
yeah,
the Filipino side.
because in Mindanao, you guys have those like what kind of terrorists are they, and what do they do? Like, can you explain to the audience that whole situation? Because I don't know anything about it really.
They are connected with the ISIS, the Abu Sayyaf. They kidnap some different people and ask for ransoms, and if they didn't, and I don't know, it's there. Sometimes they randomly beheaded other people,
Oh shit.
and I think and it's kind of traumatic to see when I was growing up.
Huh. Well, I guess what I'm wondering about the Philippines in general is like, I don't know, do you think a developing country like that can have like something like the Nazi Party? Like, do you think politics could have that much control over people? Is it developed enough for that, or is the way that it works a little differently? Do you think, as a
I
citizen?
I don't think that it will work that way because Filipinos are not really uh, not so educated in terms of the politics. Some are educated, but in a wrong way. The education that they are doing on Facebook or whatever social medias, they're using the flaws of the government to make a uh, activism, fake activism for their own personal interest because they're of their hatred with whatever the government did that they are not really in favor. But I don't think that the same situation that happened in in the during the World War II or what the Nazis did will happen in the Philippines because the Filipino people are not so supported. They didn't support a particular. It's all over the place. It's not there. Not much solidarity in terms of politics in this area.
Right. That's that's a weird one, but it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing, maybe. Just like a lot of things in life. I don't know. In the sense that, like, yeah, the population may not be, the average citizen may not be as educated or up to date on current affairs as they could be, but at the same time, I don't know. Maybe it's good that that sphere of society doesn't have as tight a grip on the people as it could. It's good that people are a little more like carefree and just I'm gonna be normal and just work my job, pay my bills, and get on with my life, watch cable TV in the afternoons or whatever. That's probably a good way to live, not the best way necessarily. I mean, you should always have your defenses up or whatever, but it's not that awful, I guess. But I mean, it's like that in every country. So no one knows as much about politics or current events or whatever as they should. It just goes without saying. And there's Anyway, fuck it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to talk about this shit anymore. So, there's a weird quote. It immediately cuts away from the part in the bar where Franz is having the conversation with the gray-haired man. So it just cuts like 2 seconds later. They're in the subway station again, and the guy is making him put on the swastika armband. And it's like, okay, just like that, he's just a straight-up Nazi now, apparently. And he's selling Nazi newspapers and shit. And right when they have the close-up of the armband or whatever, this intertitle, which is like a shot with it's a frame with words on it. They used them in silent films to convey the dialogue when you couldn't speak it. But so like right as they have the close up of the swastika, there is an intertitle. It cuts to an intertitle that has the quote, "There must be order in paradise." And what I want to know, Simone, is what is that quote's significance in the film?
There must be order. Yeah, I with the current events that take place or the scenes I saw it as political. I don't know how after the scenes that becomes it's Nazi and every time it becomes a bit or really political at this point. The views or and also with the following, not only in this station, also the following current event in the bar or when he meets his acquaintance. This is what takes place. It become focused on not only on Beaver Cub's character but mostly on his new thing, his Nazism or being a part of the Nazis.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly, obviously, I mean, that's what they did, right? It's there to sort of sum up the attitude of the National Socialist Party in Germany at the time. They want to dominate everything. They want to force people to be a certain way. They want to affect their agenda through just brute force and control, and that's what that's there for. And yeah, it's a very poignant, kind of just, it like pops out. That was a good one. It was effective. It was like, oh shit, just kind of comes onto the screen and leaves just as quickly, and it makes you think. It kind of makes you think. So yeah. So then after that, well, what did you think? This is a really interesting one. What did you think of the interaction that Franz had with the Jewish hot dog vendor that he was talking to about all this?
I think that would be more effective. Quite effective, but not really so effective because getting into the conversation, the Jewish guy is not really that much or enraged with whatever Franz is saying regarding what his belief in Nazism is, or what is the reason for him, or what is the need for him to get into the movement. But when he revealed that he was a Jewish, there's not much impact. I'm expecting so much impact in this scene, or a shocking revelations at this point, but it doesn't take place as hard or as effective as it is.
Interesting. Yeah, no, interesting because I don't think the point was to be like super impactful or whatever. I think the point was to be effective, was to actually be impactful by being kind of casual about it, mundane. That's the power, is that this Jewish guy, he kind of, even though Franz represents someone who hates him and everything he is or whatever, he's still able to kind of meet him halfway and kind of like shake his hand a little bit almost and be like, I really don't like what you're saying or whatever, what your beliefs are, but it's like, I understand that you're, he takes the higher road, he's the better man. And it's really, it's really powerful to see a human being who's being, and it's poignant too. It's sad, obviously, because of the historical context. Like, that guy might be dead soon, that guy might be fucking dead soon, and everybody he knows and his family and everything. So it's very meaningful. It's very important that he sort of, is able to still do what the Nazis couldn't do with the Jewish people and treat them like human beings. He treats Franz like a human being, and he recognizes the real world aspect of it, and that's it's weird, it's sort of it gives you pause, and I felt bad. I don't know. I like that scene a lot. So then after that, you've got the bar scene, I guess. After, it's like a really long scene really long drawn out scene where, well, I guess before that you have the conversation, but this is sort of, these go hand in hand, right? So in the subway station, after he talks to the Jewish guy, he runs into some old acquaintances from his neighborhood, and they clearly they disagree with his random Nazism that just came out of nowhere for whatever reason. And he tries explaining it to them, and they disagree, and his friend is disappointed in him and, doesn't want to be his friend anymore or whatever. And then after that, in the scene that immediately follows, they're all in the same bar, and it's his friend is, I think his friend's Drek. Drek and his group, they don't like Franz now, and so they spend like 10 minutes or something like messing with him, trying to get him to start shit so that they can have an excuse to fight him, to beat him up because he's a fascist supporter or whatever. And so yeah, there are several things in that, but to start, well, we were talking about literary elements at the beginning of the episode. What did you think of the poem that Franz recited in the bar from the prisoner? Well, what did you think of, what significance does it lend to the episode overall? What effect does it have on the viewer? And just how do you feel about it, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, and I'm getting back into the idea that his situation, if he didn't get out of the prison, or he might be still in prison, that things might be much more better in the prison. And also the way he talks about the prison, his experience in the prison, that even though his reaction with how things are, or whatever the situation is in the bar, there's the tension. So the way that I interpreted the way he speak about it, there's a little bit of longing, or so much longing, in how he talks about he shares about the poem. And it's also it could be also related with social contexts that are taking place. For example, he after he mentioned the poem, and he sings, and his friends approaches him and threaten to beat him or ask him to get into a brawl. But he mentioned about the story of Genesis, the beginning of the first story in the Bible, mentioning Adam and Eve, about freedom, or everything that is related to that. I think I see the connection in it. Something political, or not exactly existential, but how he exercises freedom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And well, so what would you think of so that's the poem as the object, I guess. What the poem represents is a physical thing in the bar scene. But I guess the second part of that question would be, what do you think of the actual subject, like the content of the poem, like what it says, what's its message and stuff, how do you feel about that? Like Franz mentions, it's a very bitter kind of, it's this long poem about how much life sucks, basically, and how fucked the world is. It's like, what do you think of that sentiment and the bitterness and all that, that aspect of the poem within the context of the film?
The way that I see it, that there's really much more things that are much better, or I think this is the normal approach, or the kind of the depressive state that I've been in, or I heard on social media, or whatever it is. It's just we tend to look at the different things to make when we're sad, or look at this much more depressing, or to give us a conscious a reason for us to mean something out of the situation.
So it's one of those things where it's like, nihilism or depression or, cynicism or whatever. It's like, it's that whole saying, right? Like, misery loves company, misery loves company. So like when you're down in the dumps or whatever, it's good to look at. It's good to say just, oh, everything's bad. It's good to dismiss even the possibility of redemption or happiness or whatever. It's good to give up. For some people, that's very comforting. It's a very comforting perspective to take. Like, well, I'm fucked. I guess I'm fucked no matter what. I have no control over it. I might as well sit around eating chips and, I don't know, drinking Monster Energy drinks all day and just going out on Twitter and bitching about everything. That's the sort of perspective that a lot of people have taken. That's a surprisingly, a depressingly high amount of people have been giving up, because of the virus or whatever, because of all whatever political fun time bullshit, yeah, and it fucking sucks, but that's what it is. It's commiseration. It's a whole sad circle jerk, isn't it? It's like we're all going to be miserable in the corner while everyone else kind of bucks up and moves on because life is tough. It's not necessarily, it's both good and bad, and you got to take the good with the bad and kind of get over it almost, even if things are really fucked up. But, I don't know. Maybe that's an oversimplification, but that seems to be what's going on here. And I don't know. I don't know if Franz is going to be able to, it seems like, because I don't know if he's going to be able to get over that perspective, because it seems like that's part of what's making him a literal Nazi or whatever, it's like, that's why he's in the ideology or whatever, it's because he's really, he's really unhinged and he's really unhappy with the state of the world and the state of the country or whatever, and a lot of people are. And so that's where the appeal comes from. It's that emptiness. It's that misery, it's being taken advantage of by political entities for the sake of pushing the party's agenda, and it doesn't care about that, but that's what makes them vulnerable, that's what makes them vulnerable. And so, yeah, I guess this is a tough question, but ultimately, at the end of the day, so Franz and Drek and all of them, they have they almost get into a fight, but they don't, because Franz kind of just freaks out. He kind of starts rambling incoherently, and they just leave him alone because they kind of realize that he's a little too nuts or whatever. He's too deranged or whatever. So what I want to know is, Simone, who do you think is ultimately right in the situation between Franz and Drek and his group?
I don't think that they are both right. I see that that's why I'm not engaging with the political issues right now, or I don't have, even in the future, I don't have the motivation or any reason to get into it, because each each position or each party is messed up or fact that they are both. I can see there are something, or I might consider what they are saying. There's they made a point at some point, some ideologies that they believe in, but the way that they work things out, or the approach that they use it, or the way that they really use it as a way to some of justification of to uh to for them to have the reason to be resentful, or to let other people get into the rage that they were in. It's both are wrong the way that they use it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, no, I think Franz is being an idiot. I think he's being really fucking dumb. There's no real point. Like, you can get other jobs. Like, things are bad, but they're not that bad. So that's one thing. And then also the other guys are just dumb too. I mean, they're trying to, you don't really fight. I don't know. Force is not always the best way to do things, and so it's like just bullying, like, well, maybe not bullying, but like, intimidating and then trying to attack him probably isn't the best idea. If they're going to do anything, they should just, if they really, if they don't like him, they should just shun him, give him the silent treatment and alienate him. But fights are never, especially like a fight like that, it's just not, it wasn't worth it, I don't know. Everyone was dumb in that situation. Everyone was wrong. There was no good. The only good was like the bartender, because he was innocent. He had nothing to do with any of that. He just wants to run his business. He just wants to make money selling drinks to people. So that's what I'll say about that whole thing. second to last question: is Franz correct in his belief that the others only disapprove of his Nazism because they're too young and naive to understand it? Do you think? I don't know. Do you think that's correct or?
Uh, I don't think though that it's also that it's based on age or whatever. It's really the way that you are going to, the way that those people or the people I know engage into politics or been really serious. The same way that these people in the bar or the scene acts is not also basically on age, but basically on their what they really wanted or their personal interests. I think that's also to get into this spectrum is really constitute or the main reason for them is their personal interest.
Yeah.
That's really what affects it, or for you to come up with this standpoint.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, I mean, he's totally wrong. I mean, he's completely wrong. He's completely off the mark. And it's exactly as he said. I mean, the poem foreshadows it all. This episode did a good job of incorporating or interweaving the literary elements into it. You know, you have all those other forms still. Like they still have the lengthy descriptions of weird shit. Like with the homosexual story, that was another example of that. A different one, but also when the old newspaper vendor was reading the sex stuff to Franz, that was also one of those examples of just a lengthy explanation of something kind of scientific and unemotional, you know, juxtaposed with something provocative going on the screen, you know, visuals and everything. But yeah, the poem really sums up everything. You know, it's like Franz is bitter, he's lost, he's kind of, you know, he's existentially looking for something, and he's looking for it in the wrong place, and the place just so happens to be Nazism. Now, you know, I think the reason why I don't think it's convincing is because it happens too quickly. You know, you don't get like there isn't this scene where like the old man goes on a, you know, he doesn't explain it enough to him. It happens way too quickly. It's like the same night that they meet one night, and then the next day he's already like converted to the religion of, you know, being a Nazi or whatever. I just that, you know, come on, that's just not realistic. I don't. It might be maybe, but I don't buy it for 1 second. From a viewer perspective, taking on the script, I don't believe the script for that. So it's annoying. I hope that the rest of the series isn't like this. To be honest, I liked the first episode a lot more. The first episode gave a lot more promise, you know, of different kinds of things, and it's like we're already gonna do the Nazi thing. It's like great. I don't know. I'm not looking forward to it. You know, I'm just not looking forward to it as much. And I hope that this doesn't become like a whole thing that, you know, episodes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's going to be like, you know, in every single one of them now. But if it is, I hope they do it right. You know, I hope they tell the story a little more, I don't know, convincingly, I guess. It's basically my issue. But yeah. So last but not least, Simone, do you think Franz is justified in his new political leanings / like belief system or whatever, or not, and why? Why is he justified, or why is he not justified?
I don't think that he's really justified with it. Even though he believes in it or he's into it, he already did a lot of things to share about his or defend his ideology right now. In this particular episode, he still doesn't know what it's really all about. If you really know what really all about or what's the point of all of it, it might take, just like you said, everything's happened so quickly that there's not much to come up with this situation that he's in to become fully a Nazi. I don't see anything or a reason for him, or not that much. We might say that there much his experience with finding jobs, but or the jobs that are not really that viable for him to make a living. But I don't think it's a big reason or a really a reasonable reason for him to convert into Nazism.
Yeah, reasonable reason. That's a good term. That's a good way to describe it. It's not very reasonable. It just comes out of nowhere. Very spontaneous, very sporadic, and very unconvincing, at least to me. Yeah, and obviously, yeah, he's not justified. I mean, we've already established in the first episode that this is not our hero. He's not a good person. He's just the person we're following for whatever reason, you know. So no, I don't, you know, this is just another fucked up thing he's doing. You know, it's like he's already killed his wife. He's already weird with, you know, whatever. It's like now he's a Nazi. It's like, oh, of course he is. I don't know. But I just, I'm curious to see where it goes. That's all I'll say. But yeah, I guess we're at the end already. So, yeah, I don't know. Someone like, do you have any other thoughts? Like any closing comments you want to make? Like, are you think you'll change your rating based on the discussion we had? I don't know, anything like that. Maybe get into before we sign off.
I think that's really the first thing that I need to do is to change my rating. To change my rating, I rated a 9, but for now I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
Because I still consider the how this conversation you said that in the initial impression is we're not able to talk that much about this episode because it's not really effective, or there are a lot of flaws in the script. I see there are some points that are really effective, but the way that they just work it, it's just too quickly. That's for the full effect to be established. That's the main problem with this episode. But I'm looking forward for the episode that the next episode that it might take a different direction. It won't be focused on Nazism.
Yeah, you know, third time's a charm and all that, right? But yeah, I hate talking about really political stuff. I don't know. I hate it. You know, nothing good ever comes from politics. You know, so it's like, you know, I don't like getting into these things. But yeah, you know, I mean, I guess if I'm going to have to, why not do it with a show that, you know, or with a movie that's, you know, people seem to have a lot of respect for in the art and, you know, artistic and like intellectual circles, right? So you know, it's not necessarily that I don't like the show that much. It's just, or the movie or whatever you want to call it. I just, it's really heavy, you know, and it's really disturbing, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and it's not what I expected it to be at all. For some reason, I had this idea in my head that it was just going to be about like some weird guy who gets out of prison and like, you know, just sort of like, I don't know, sleeps with prostitutes all day and stuff. Like I thought it would be that kind of story about like a waster or something, you know, like a criminal. I didn't think it was going to be like a criminal, just someone who like robs people and shit and like is like some sort of anti-hero, you know, and it's supposed to be about like alienation in society, basic human loneliness. That's what I thought it was going to be about. And it probably, like, those things will probably still come up, but I thought the 20s would be earlier than the Nazis, but I'm wrong, apparently, you know. And so I guess it's good that I know now, you know, I learned something today. I learned something. It's educational. But, yeah, man, fuck, like, I don't know. It just kind of came out of left field for me, and, like, I'm still kind of processing it. And maybe that's the sign of an effective work of art, but, yeah, it makes me really uncomfortable, dude. It makes me really fucking uncomfortable to talk about. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I also learned something. This conversation or this episode helped me to think of the points that I tend to not notice or unknowingly didn't focus on. Yeah, and I think that the approach that I will do with the next episode is much way different with all this. For example, the first episode established something good, and I thought that it would be here, or at some point that I focus on this episode that those particular good points are present.
Yeah, yeah. What are your predictions? Like, what do you think is going to happen in episode 3?
I don't want to focus on this thing, but it might be really political, or it seemed that I think that the story is moving. It's set in the 1920s and heading. I'm not sure how long that it will take, but as long as now the Nazism is established, or it's become one of the norm or known issues or social, not a social thing, but there's no reason for him to turn his back into this movement. I think that the more the episode go to that, he might be more in deep in his new ideology. but I hope that it's not. I just hope that it might be focused on what we really expected in the last conversation.
Yeah, like I thought it was going to be like the German version of like the Charmer with Nigel Havers. You know what I mean? It's just like something like that. Just some weird guy who like kind of cheats society or whatever, and like does things unconventionally. Like I thought, that's what I thought it was going to be. You know, and it might have elements of that because I mean, I guess they have things in common. Like both main characters are killers. I guess they kill people. They're good with women too. That's another thing that they have in common. But the Charmer wasn't very political, you know, is the thing. And this is overtly political, and like right away. And so yeah, it's interesting. But you know, we shall truck through and continue with the rest of the parts. Thank you guys for watching. Comment down below. Engage with us. You know, we want to create a place for discussion and all that. You know, that's the most important thing. Healthy, intellectual, social, political, whatever forms of discourse and all that, you know, from all sides of whatever you want to call it. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed and stay tuned for more. Peace. Bye for now.